Hello, everyone. I'm Hajra Kartlia, and I'm a diversity peer educator at the Multicultural Center. And I am here to introduce Dr. Monica F. Cox. First of all, thank you so much for joining in and giving us the privilege. Dr. Monica Cox is a professor of engineering education at the Ohio State University and is a 2020 American Society for Engineering Education Fellow. She holds her master's in mathematics, her bachelor's in mathematics and her master's in industrial engineering. She followed further her studies with a PhD degree in leadership and policy studies. She began her academic career in the School of Engineering Education at the Purdue University, where she earned a Presidential Career Award for scientists and engineers, becoming the first American woman to earn tenure in Purdue College of Engineering. In 2016, she became the inaugural chair in the Department of Engineering Education at the Ohio State University. She is the founder and CEO of STEMinent LLC, which houses educational assistant, professional development, and media offerings. Her research focuses on the use of mixed methodologies to explore questions across the education content, particularly why engineering women faculty persist. Dr. Koss has led and collaborated on multidisciplinary projects totaling approximately 16 million and has authored over 130 publications. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'd like to transfer it to Dr. Monica F. Cox.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate being here today. And yeah, I look forward to just sharing this time with you and learning with you as well. So welcome to Stop Playing Diversity. I want to say that today's conversation is one where I think it's one that should be happening, but isn't always happening. And so my style is really direct and authentic, but it comes from a place of wanting to plant seeds so that people can begin to have these conversations and continue the conversations after I have left. And so, yes, I am a professor, but I also, as an entrepreneur, am packaging this. And you can follow me at drmonicacox.com. If you like the content that's here, I do have some additional offerings in the form of digital guides and some coaching, so we can continue this. But for now, I just want to give you a little bit so that we can start this conversation. So I appreciated that you had your space and your guidelines because that's really important. I want to engage with anyone who is here to learn. And it doesn't matter if you are a professional in the DEI space, or maybe you're just curious, or you feel like you have been invisible, or you feel alone, or you just want to be someone who can be an accomplice to people. I mean, whatever you bring, that is what I want to engage with today. And I look forward to connecting with you. So I have my own rules of engagement as well, because I think this helps us as we move forward. I think that, communicating respectfully, we have that covered in the previous guidelines. But I do want you, as you are comfortable, as was said before, to share your insights and your perspectives. I do want you to, be authentic so you can add to the conversation. I hope that you will bring a teachable mind. I hope that if you do not know someone who's in this environment, you can meet that person so you can continue to have these conversations post today's session. And then I hope that you will expect to leave better than you arrived. I want to plant seeds and I want to share perspectives from my perspective as a Black woman, as a Black woman professor, as a relatively young Black woman, and all the other identities to which I connect as well. So, although I presented who this is for, who might be in the room, I want to say that I want to target accomplices and diverse groups. So let me tell you what I mean by accomplices, because I'm sure that you've heard allies, you've heard advocates, champions, sponsors, mentors, like all types of identifiers when it comes to the people who are, being those supporters for minoritized groups or for people who represent diversity in all its forms. What I mean by accomplices is people who, well, I'll give you an example because I have a colleague, Dr. Kristen Moore at the University of Buffalo, and we're writing a paper and we distinguish between allies, advocates, and accomplices. So take me, for example. If I have a cut, then if my ally in my terms would be someone who might cry for me because they know that I'm hurt. If I am cut, my advocate is someone who might call 911 because they see that I need stitches. That cut is pretty deep. And if I have an accomplice, when I'm cut, that accomplice is someone who bleeds with me. They also, like, the cut is so deep that somehow, they're there. I mean, it's like the embodiment is there and that pain is there. And so I am targeting accomplices in today's presentation because I think that this is the level that we need to see the changes that are needed in our country, in our communities, in our organizations, and in our communities. So I'm going to be at that level. So it's going to be pretty assertive with some of the language today. So in terms of some of the outcomes, today you're going to learn what I mean when I'm talking about playing diversity. You're going to recognize some initial signs that your diversity efforts aren't what they should be in an organization. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the costs for diversity because there are always costs and what it actually means to engage in this space. And then we're going to discover practices that actually move individuals from this place of playing to embodying what I'm talking about. And so understand that although I have focused specifically on diversity, this can also include diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but I will continue to use the phrase diversity throughout the presentation. So let me tell you my story. I am a person from Southeast Alabama, from the country. And my earliest memories of diversity, equity, inclusion, or even just kind of identifying with the identity to which I most embody, which is connected back to issues of race, came when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I'm from a little town called Newville, Alabama. And there was a Ku Klux Klan rally in that city. And I remember being like maybe in our family station wagon, and I talked to my parents and I asked, well, who are these people with the sheets on their heads? And my parents said, these are people who don't particularly care for brown and Black people. And my 4 or 5-year-old mind could not understand how someone who had never met me could not like me. And I do think that something about engaging with issues of race, engaging with something so deep at such a young age somehow influenced me in such a way that equity was a part of who I was, and it has always been a part of who I am, and justice and activism is also that brand as well. So I just wanted to let you know that is where I come from. It is this place where I feel that all voices need to be heard. I believe in the principles that are written in the U.S. Constitution and how all men and women, are created equal. All people are created equal. And so that is, that's important to me. And that is my perspective. So I write a lot on Medium. So if you read Medium articles, you can follow me. But I have this thing that I say, and I say, when I'm blamed for disrupting a system that wasn't built for me and am expected to fix that system in the same breath, leaders in an organization are not being accountable for their roles in this system. They are playing diversity. And I first thought about this term playing diversity when I was a department chair, because when I came to my most recent institution, I asked in my interview, do you play diversity? Or are you really practicing diversity? Because I don't play diversity. I expect for rules to be rules. I expect to be treated just as, as equitably as any other person who's in this position. And I will call this organization out if it is not what it says it should be. That's just who I am. And so, once again, this brand came because I want to talk to other organizations about how to really practice that, because that is an expectation that many people have when they enter these organizations. And I just want to hold these institutions accountable as well. So look, I've talked a little bit, but I want us to kind of do the scenario. I have a couple, but I think that for the sake of time, I'm going to do one, and then I'll just read the next one so that when you look at the recording, you can pause it and kind of engage. So within these scenarios, you can work in small groups with this in the future. But for now, I'd really love for you all to maybe engage in the chat with thoughts if you are comfortable sharing. So what would you do? A minoritized supervisor communicates with the leader of a central unit in her organization that she needs paperwork to be processed in a timely manner. The leader of that unit ignores the minoritized leader and complains to their mutual supervisor that she is causing trouble. What would you do? And when you think about this, kind of think about your situation, whether you are, you are from you are represented in a diverse group, like what would you do? What would anyone do? Whatever perspective you have to take. So just take a few moments, maybe in the chat. And Clarissa, if you can maybe share this with me, some thoughts as people type, that'll be great.
So, hi, this is Aman Sara. I'm a faculty member in the chemistry department, and I would go and tell the supervisor, I am causing trouble. I'm causing good trouble.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And I want to kind of point out that phrase causing trouble, because that does come up when I present the scenario to people. And it's like, what does that mean? What is causing trouble? And how do people interpret trouble in this organization? So you're bringing up a wonderful point with communication. We're talking about things like tone policing and, what does professionalism look like? Who defines what professionalism like? So all of these questions are coming up. Very good. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Jennifer. So I'm assuming that I'm a peer in this particular organization. I tend to take the stand back and look at all the factors that might be contributing to that claim, so that just to get other people thinking that, it's not necessarily accurate or inaccurate, but it's like, what are the factors, that might cause somebody to say that? Because I've had to kind of call out people for not realizing gender bias in certain scenarios. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's really good. So the thing I want to comment on that one about is the multiple perspectives, and really understanding that there's just not one correct answer, once again, or just one perspective. And I think sometimes we want to go into the side of the loudest voices in the room, or the people who maybe have more power or more positionality. And so we want to make sure that we are being very comprehensive in what we're doing. So I do want to just put another few perspectives that people have said and out there too. Whenever we look at a situation, sometimes you hope that there are policies and that there are processes in place to help guide you a little bit too. And so, are there timelines? Are there roles and responsibilities of what people are supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it? One of the things that really helps many times in an organization is to make sure that you do have those clear practices, so that it is clear that you separate the personal from the professional. And when you have policies and practices of how to do work, that's also really helpful as well. But if it does come down to situations where there are just conflicts, you also do have to be pretty open as well. There's also documentation. People have said this in the past. This could turn really ugly. And so what would happen if it turns ugly? Well, you don't ever want to have to go into a situation where, it's reporting, but you do want to make sure that you have your facts as well. And so that's something too. But there are multiple ways to think about this. The point that I want to make is that, depending on your perspective, you may think about this a certain way. And of course, we have, tons of implicit bias training, but I think that it's time to go into deeper places when we talk about this too. And when we're talking about conversations, is looking to see, what we are doing from an infrastructure perspective to try and help these conversations move forward as well. So thank you. Just briefly, I will say that, what would you do? This one is: an accomplice is being pressured to give the best laboratory resources to a senior employee who is not a team player, but is used to getting what he wants in the organization. The senior employee ignores women on his team and withdraws resources from them when they need them. The accomplice doesn't want any trouble. So, you see that we do have this accomplice, and and many times when you have accomplices, it's not just easy to be an accomplice. You just don't wake up and say, oh, let me just speak up and that's my privilege. I mean, that isn't how stuff works. And so, just going through this process is important, because you're also looking back maybe at policies and processes. You're looking at a little bit of the history. You're looking at the dynamics. You're looking at the hierarchy and everything that goes on. And so understanding that complexity helps you to think about how to move forward, but also understanding that this is a difficult conversation that might occur. Okay. So I'm going to continue to move forward with this. And if you have other thoughts, like I said, Clarissa, please let me know.
If it's okay, I do have two that I wanted to share with you.
Yes.
So our participant shared, I would like to say that they're not necessarily causing trouble, but simply voicing their needs.
Okay. Yes. I like it.
And a second participant stated, I would want to point out that the potential harmful effects of noting an individual who holds a marginalized identity is, in quotation marks, causing trouble. I would ask that we look at even how our expectations are impacted and build upon white supremacy, and therefore there is an inherent racist nature to being a good fit, in quotation marks, which I've heard a lot of times as well in talking about implicit biases within hiring, making sure that the new hire is quote unquote a good fit for the team. So that's also a very good point.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I do want to say something about that really quickly, because many times within an organization, people do not realize that, when you're inviting someone in, it's like coming to your house, for example. You do want to be hospitable. Like maybe there's a certain way that you do things, but you sometimes have to you have to do things differently depending upon who you're inviting into this system. And I think that's something that we're also hitting and onto. And so, are you going to be rigid, or are you somehow going to be inclusive? And so that gets back a little bit into that DEI piece that we were talking about as well. So thank you. So I want to bring this because I told you my perspective that I want to speak about is as a Black woman. It is what I know best. And I think that I can use this to provide the examples, using my voice. And so I often say this when it comes back to tone policing and perspectives. And there's this trope of being sometimes an angry Black woman. But I realize that I'm a Black woman whose questions make people angry, and there's a difference. And this perspective is something that I want to kind of bring out, because I think it brings up sometimes that, when we talk about emoting, or when we talk about things that maybe are cultural or a part of someone's identity, we need to be very sensitive of how we are judging that. And so stepping back sometimes to be like, is it really what I think it is? Or is it something different? Like that's something that helps as we move forward in this conversation as well. So thank you all. Something I was going to say that I want to put out there for people too, particularly as you're in leadership, is this idea of buy one, get one free. There's this term that many people use, of course, intersectionality, but I also think that when you are hiring people, sometimes individuals think, well, if you are hiring a Black woman, then it's you're ticking boxes. So you're ticking race, you're ticking gender, but that also is a mentality that needs to be alleviated, because it needs to be explored, because people are not buy one get one specials, and we just want to put that out there. And so I also thought about this too. Sometimes people ask, like, well, what's your perspective, Monica? Like, what do you want? You should be really honored that you're in this organization. And I'm thinking, I want all the rights and privileges that anyone else has. And I think from that perspective, that's what many people in diverse groups want. It's like if you are a part of an organization, it's similar to when you're talking about like constitutional rights. You want due process. You want everything that goes along with being a member of that space. And you know, the golden rule is something that we maybe learned when we were young, but do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Would you want to belong? Would you want to have the best resources? Would you want to be heard? You know, that is something that should be at the cornerstone of how we have these conversations and how we do this work. And I think that is how we began to stop playing diversity in environments, when we kind of say collectively, we do believe in equity. We do believe that, you know, all people have rights in this organization. So I am going to quickly go through a few things that are going to maybe sound a little harsh, but I think sometimes when we're talking about this work, we need harshness. And this came from a perspective of me almost writing this in a poem, because I thought about many of the things that happen in society and how we sometimes don't label what is going on in higher education as sometimes it's violent. And you know, I think that, you know, I'm going to use these series of words to kind of present these metaphors. But first of all, inviting diverse groups to have a seat at the table, but not allowing us to have a voice at that table is a form of starvation. So it's like giving me an opportunity to eat a banquet, you know, eat a wonderful banquet, but I can't even taste it. Like, you're not going to let me have everything, or I can only have the vegetables, but I cannot have the desserts, or I can't have, you know, a beverage to drink. You know, we need to make sure that people have access to everything. Next, we have to be really careful about optics. And so using people for the optics that they bring, like putting them on websites or brochures to try and recruit more people there, I mean, that's exploitation. And we want to make sure that we're not doing this. Now, one thing I want to say as I use this language and as I tell you this is that I'm not trying to beat anyone up. I'm trying to present this in a different way so that you see it in ways that sometimes people who are members of, you know, minoritized groups think about it. And we often don't share this information, or maybe it's just easier to leave an organization. It's easier to say, well, I don't belong, but I want you to hear it from this perspective as well. I think that when you don't listen to diverse groups, you know, when we bring up issues that directly impact our success, that feels a lot like neglect. Also, you know, bringing diverse groups to a workplace that's toxic and doesn't call out discrimination and injustice is abuse. So, this is one too where I think sometimes people want to recruit individuals, but there are issues in that organization or in that environment, and they haven't been cleaned up. And you know that the person over here has this issue. You've heard a comment, you've been in a meeting, and you something in you just doesn't feel right, but you're bringing someone in, and that person now has to engage in that space. And to set someone up to have to fend for themselves when they expect the organization to represent what was presented to them when they were recruited, that's problematic. And I think that's something that's a form of playing diversity as well. This one is a hot button, but I still stand by this one. But not paying people in diverse groups what we are worth is robbery. And if you think about it, many people look on robbing a bank or stealing or embezzling. It's like, oh my gosh, those are crimes that people are penalized for, that people are imprisoned for. But in our organizations, we often do not label the inequities and the pay and wage disparities as they are. And so we need to start saying, when there is a woman who is doing the same job as her male counterpart, yet we don't think that she should be compensated appropriately, we're robbing her. Like, that is what it is. And I think many times we are very quiet about it. You know, we're like, that's just the organization. But is it the organization? Is it the way it should be? we have to start pushing if we want to see change. I think also setting diverse groups up to fail in environments not made for them is sabotage. There's the expectation that people are going to come in and do their jobs. But when you have that emotional tax, when you have cultural taxes that are on you as well, maybe the expectation to be the DEI expert when you are hired to do something completely different, that's difficult. That's difficult to come back from because that's emotional energy. Those are resources that people have to put into a space that maybe is not their expertise, or it's maybe not it's not what they were expected to do. And so make sure that you are not sabotaging someone in your org. So I'm gonna take a moment to show you a story, share a little story. This stood out to me because I read it in the architectural record. And this is Dean Leslie Loco, who happens to be, well, she was the former dean at the City College of New York. And she wrote a resignation letter that was very public. And I want to focus on the last part of this that says, the lack of respect and empathy for Black people, especially Black women, caught me off guard. Although it's by no means unique to Spitzer versus the organization. I suppose I'd say in the end that my resignation was a profound act of self-preservation. And if you are looking at what's happening now, what has happened post last summer, you'll see that there are more and more people who are speaking out, who are saying, in my organization, this was happening and I didn't say anything, but I can't take it anymore. And I want you to know that by the time someone gets to a place where they're like, this is an act of self-preservation, there were other things that happened beforehand. Maybe the person did or did not tell you that there were things that were happening, but we don't want individuals to get to a point where they say, I had to preserve myself. I feared for my life because of this organization. There are so many untold stories and we have to do better. I am so aggressive with you because the pain, the hurt, and the unspoken things that are happening as it relates back to diversity, equity, inclusion, and the experiences that people are having in organizations is serious. It's about life or death. And, I just want you to know about that as well. So continuing on, I think allowing people to demean and to demoralize diverse groups feels like assault. It is an attack. And it is like a silent attack sometimes. Sometimes it's passive aggressive. But when you see in an environment that someone is being degraded, when you see that someone is being torn down, when you see that things are not right, and it's obvious that it's not right, it's not even a secret, then that is assaulting that person, whether they say anything or not. And if you are an accomplice, you need to step in the same way that you would see someone outside on your street attacking someone. What would you say in your organization when you see that attack, when you hear it? Are you going to participate in it, or are you just going to leave it alone? Because whether that person tells you anything or not, the hurt is there and it's going to be there whether or not you say anything. And I want to say disregarding diverse groups and our contributions to environments we help build is also dismissive. Do not just take what people have, what they bring, and say, we want you to bring us more people. We want your friends to come here. That's using people. And you don't want to be that space known for that. Also, blaming diverse groups for being targets of abuse and making us endure that abuse is cowardly. And so, if your organization or if your space is not what it should be, leadership is owning that. Leadership is saying, we're going to change it. Leadership is saying, I see you, I hear you, and I want to do something about this. I will do something about this. And so, let's have more courage. That's something that's missing many times in higher education. It's like a lot of people want to place blame. They want to say, oh, we know this is happening. But our courageous leaders are the ones who are going to take DEI to that next level. Trying to break diverse groups so we don't call out systemic racism, inequities, and discrimination is a form of bullying. And so when it's called out, when it's aired, whether it's true or not, think about what I said about due process. We're going to have to bring this out. Someone made an accusation. Let's see like, let's use our processes. Hopefully you have good processes so we can follow through with this, and let's address it. Because when you cover it up, that's when you do have, situations that do come out in the media. That's when you have situations where people are having breakdowns. That's where you're having situations that are destroying entire groups and departments and organizations. And so, it's a brave choice to confront this and to kind of see it in this aggressive way that I'm saying it. But I think that that's what's going to also help us as we're talking about dismantling some of the oppressive practices that are happening in organizations. And so I wanted to end all of that by coming back to the cost. DEI costs, but who will pay the price? And when I talk about cost, many times we immediately go to money, but the cost could be someone speaking up. Will the person who is being who is going through a situation, is that the person who has to speak up, or is it the organization saying we're going to change policies and processes? And so I want you to always think about that. It's very similar when you think about risks and benefits. When you think about checks and balances, DEI is that space. And so that's what's needed. So let's start with like really specific things. I've kind of done high level, like, oh, okay, here are some things. These are different ways to think about this. But some of the very specific things, this is one of my peeves for real. Sometimes I used to tell people, I wish that I would have had more support. I would love support. And they're like, what does support mean? And so if no one is able to tell you what support means, I'm going to tell you very specifically some ways that you can support, and these are some tangibles. So nurturing is something that can be done if you want to engage. I already talked about support, but I want to emphasize that support is not just what you want to give as an organization or what organizations want to give. Support is what is needed for that person to thrive in the organization. Also, when we talk about respect, once again, respect is relative, but it's defining respect in the way that matters and has meaning to people in the organization as well. Resources, once again, so if you're going to do this work, you can't expect everyone to do it for free. And so, put that in, put the resources in. People want to be taken seriously. They want to be treated equitably. They want individuals to respond to them in a timely manner. And so one other thing that I see that happens a lot is that people get afraid. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a problem. We have a DEI issue. Somebody else is going to take care of it. And so a week goes by, 2 weeks, someone sends an email, a month, 6 months. People are hoping and wishing that it goes away, but it does not go away. You have to address it. It's like, some type of disease. Like, yes, you can ignore it, but the situation might get bad. It might get worse. And so you need to have treatment. You need to have a diagnosis. You need to have treatment. You need to have a plan for how you're going to address it. So if there are complaints, they have to be investigated. A lot of people don't want to do that too. I've seen a lot of avoidance. We don't want to get sued. We don't want to do da-da-da-da. Okay, but you are in an organization where complexities are going to happen. People are going to question. People on one side won't like what people on the other side do. There's going to be something. Everyone's not going to like this. If you are in this work because it's easy, you need to find something else to do, because this is going to be complex work, and you have to put the work in to see the results that you want to see. Also, I put racism, but you can put any ism in here. You have to step in when you see something happening. We talk about being an active bystander. We talk about, just all these other things that people do and don't do. But if you see something, say something. That's it. That's this rule. When you are here, if you know it, you need to say something. And that's where the courage comes in. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. So I told you that I have some products that I'll tell you about at the end. For those of you who want to continue this conversation and go deeper into some of the things that I won't be able to go into detail about in today's session. But these are just some points that I think are important, just as reminders. So what do I think diverse groups, diverse employees want? I think you need to make sure that people have a seat and a voice at the table. It's not just about being pretty and being seen. We're focusing holistically on the person. We're taking action against discrimination and harassment. We're giving equal pay for equal work. We are making sure that there is systemic change, not just individual change in an organization, not just one person trying to be the champion, the savior, and the martyr, for DEI. We're going to make sure that we have those open conversations that can be tough. I know a lot of people don't like conflict. A lot of people don't want to confront, but I keep saying this over and over. When you're talking about how you're going to stop playing diversity, somebody's going to have to speak. Somebody's going to have to speak up, and those words might be a little bit uncomfortable. We're going to have to confront demeaning behaviors and practices and things that that undermine individuals in the organization. We're going to have to assume credibility, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. We have to acknowledge contributions that people make in the environment. We also have to form partnerships and collaborations, and not just work with who we want to work with, or work with people who are safe, or work with people we know. If you're bringing someone in, we're going to include those people in the organization, and we're going to work together in the organization to be great together. And then you have to provide meaningful support. And remember, I told you the support is not just the support you want to give or the support that the organization wants to give. The support is the support is what the people need, who are, you know, in this position. So I told you, we are going to break this down specific. So what are some tangibles that you can do? You can review and revise your current policies and processes. That means that you need to investigate what you are doing, who's benefiting, who gets value from it. You need to also address your biases and prejudices. You know, many people like, take implicit bias training. Okay, implicit bias training is good, but you have to do something with that. It just can't be like, well, I have a bias, so that's my excuse, check. No, that is not how this is going to end. Also, you may have to change the infrastructure. When you come in, like I love the example earlier where it's like, this is not a good fit. Well, guess what? Maybe we need to shift because we have someone else in here, and we have to make sure that this person fits now. So that's a different approach. Also, you're going to have to educate people about the new norms of the system. You can't just assume, okay, we made changes and we haven't communicated. You have to communicate it widely, whether it's in meetings, whether it's via email, whether it's the creation of new policies, whether it's shared governance. You have to communicate. That's a process within itself. Some other things, conflict is coming, whether you like it or not. You also have to make tough decisions to eliminate discrimination. Everybody's not going to like it, but if you're a leader, if this is something that you're committed to, change is coming. Also, you have to listen to the disheartening stories of oppression. And sometimes it's very painful. I'm not telling you. So let me tell you what you don't do. You don't just go out and be like, tell me your rough story, put it out, and then you do nothing. That is disrespectful. What you have to do is sit there. And if you are a leader, when that person tells you something, you don't just take that person's pain and lock it away and walk away. You now are responsible. You've now heard something that is just not aligned with where your organization needs to be, and you have to act. Whether that's going back to policy, going back, talking to someone or whatever, you now have a responsibility. And you also have to maybe have conversations that have never occurred in an organization. This is new. This is just a new space. And so you have to kind of be comfortable to facilitate that and to find out how to move in a way that's going to shift the environment how it needs to be. So that's a lot. Breathe. Whew, if you're like, whew, this is a lot. Let me tell you something. We're going to keep going a little bit, though. I want to also address this thing where people say, someone's a diversity hire and we want the best people in the organization. I hear that all the time. We can't have diversity and excellence because they just don't coexist. Yes, they do. I need people to stop the lie that you can't be diverse and excellent, because you can. You can have both. And don't assume that just because someone comes from this diverse perspective or is a member of a minoritized group that they aren't excellent. No, we don't do that. And also, let's talk about power. You can share power and you can remain powerful. So Brittany Packnett Cunningham is an activist, and she talked about this in one of her videos. And many times people come into an organization and they'll say, when we have more diversity in the organization, then we're losing something. Sorry, we're losing something. And what that means is that, you know, there's this zero-sum idea, but she's also talking about oxygen. And she says many times people see it as you only have so much oxygen. But when you're looking at an organization, working together actually makes you more powerful, because collectively you are powerful. Collectively you are innovating. Collectively you are doing work that you could not have done by yourself. And that's the perspective. So changing the conversation and the tone and how people work. So with that in mind, I just want to say you have to have courage, and you have to have a plan. It's very deliberate. At the end of the day, these are two things that need to happen. And as I kind of near the end of the presentation, I want to say I wrote this for diverse faculty because that is the perspective that I had. But you can fill this in with any group. But I want to say that although you may be in an amazing place, that you have to look out for yourself also. So don't be ashamed if you have to take care of yourself. You can find another job, but you can't find another life. And if you are in a place where people do play diversity and they won't stop playing diversity, have enough discernment to be able to say, I can move on. That is the lesson that I would have told myself 15 years ago, that no matter what, when you say, these are my boundaries, these are my non-negotiables, then you will always be in a space where you will not tolerate people playing diversity. And so yeah, just want to say that part. So I love affirmations, and this is like the thing that I will leave you with as well. So on the left you have the affirmations for diverse groups, and then on the right you have them for anyone who wants to be an accomplice. And so out loud I will say, that this organization can't snatch my joy. An organization can be anything, this group, this organization, this person, this relationship, whatever, but this organization can't snatch my joy, my peace, my self-esteem, my relationships, my family, my sanity, my confidence, or my dignity. When I leave this workplace, I will be stronger, wiser, bolder, and whole. And so I want you to know that one of the signs of making sure that you are not playing diversity is that whoever is in your organization is going to be better. They're either going to be better in it because they choose to stay in it, or they're going to be better when they leave, and they're going to say great things about where they were because you did what you needed to do to take care of them and to make sure they belonged, and they did all those things that I mentioned before. Now, if you're an accomplice, you can say, I acknowledge that my perspective is not always the right perspective. I boldly speak up and out for DEI because I realize that lives are at stake. I treat diverse people as I want to be treated. Equity is at the forefront of my actions. I say this as affirmations because you have to be deliberate about this. This is not something that's just going to walk up to your door like an Amazon package and just be like, oh, now it's great. No, this takes work and courage. And if you have to speak to yourself every day to say, this is what I'm going to do, you do it. Stick it on Post-its, write it on your notes. Do whatever you need to, because this is what gives you the courage to do the work that needs to be done. So with that in mind, let me tell you how we're going to continue this conversation. So I have a private Facebook group on I'm called The Trajectory. That's something that I'm building. If you want to continue this conversation and be a part of this group, please look for that. If you are on Facebook and you have 3 questions to answer, you can join. You can also purchase some guides there on my website at drmonicacox.com. So I lay it down in more detail, some of the stuff that I've told you here, but I really do have things focused on at individual and organizational levels for how to do this. So it's more of an action plan and a guide. And then I also have an accomplice book for people who want to know the difference between being an accomplice and an ally. So this is interesting because it provides some of the things I said here, but also ways to facilitate, like questions you can offer in a meeting to kind of dig into some of the things I'm saying. Like, I'm offering all this stuff because I'm an open book. I'm authentic. I don't work with you. And so it doesn't hurt me to be able to say all these things. But if you want to find ways to kind of probe and facilitate these conversations in ways that would almost be like, me coaching you a little bit, this is what you might want to purchase as well. And then you can have both guides if you're an administrator or you want, just to kind of have this. I think you can get this for $39.99 on my website, and it's available for purchase there. Also, I have to do my plug. If you want me to coach you or consult or just learn anything more about what I've said, if you like this aggressive message or if you just want to have a conversation, let me know. I also welcome just any thoughts. What else do you want to learn? How can I help you? Because some of my offerings are also free as well. And so just email me, info@drmonicacox.com. And then I post daily on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. And so a lot of the thoughts that I have, a lot of the engagement is there. So find me at Dr. Monica Cox. So with that in mind, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to offer. Thank you.
But I do want to open up to you all as participants. If you have any questions or comments, you are more than welcome to place them in the chat, or again, to your level of comfortability. If you would like to unmute yourself, you are more than welcome to do so as well.
Let's say we in our org, or me as a leadership position, have fallen into, like, we have played diversity basically, right? Which is a bad thing, of course. How would you go to, like, maybe first just apologizing, or of course I think action more than anything would be most effective there, but coming to our players, our BAPOC players, sorry, this is coming from perspective of team sports. Yeah, how do you go about that? Because the harm has already been done, is kind of the perspective.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you for your question. So I think you just start from this place of humility. It's this thing where we all need grace, in our lives. And, none of us is perfect. And I think there's that vulnerability that you have. It's just that recognition. It's saying, in the past, maybe this happened, but, I attended this seminar or I read this book, and here are some points that really stand out to me. And I want to open this up as a point of conversation for us. But one thing I'll say is that everything is about time. So think about any relationship that you're in. Like, if someone, this is extreme and it's not really totally related, but like if someone cheated on you, you're not just gonna be like, oh, that person cheated on me and I'm okay. Like, that forgiveness just does not happen that way. It's like people's actions speak louder than words. And so you're gonna have to regain the trust. And it's like giving examples of like, one that I'll say is, if you have like all men on a team and you're always talking about like gender diversity, but no woman ever is on your team, then you say, we want to make sure that we are diversifying our team. And then you have the actions, you have the corresponding action. But then once you bring someone on the team, you have to be inclusive. And so that's part of the action too. And so over time, people are going to see, is it real or is it not real? And so, remember I told you about the plan. Your plan is, let's recognize and admit that we have an issue, and then these are the things I'm going to do, and then you actually do it, and then you're kind of assessed to see if you did what you said you were going to do. So it takes time. It's communication and it's feedback. It's this loop of, you know what, if I miss the mark, you have permission to tell me that I missed the mark, and you have to humble yourself as a leader and to just take that. And that hurts when someone's like, you didn't do that quite well, but it's how you respond also. Do you receive it, or do you bark at them and do you retaliate? No.
Yeah, you like respond with compassion. I'm and humbly. By the way, I'm just so thankful for this. I think that a lot of this applies to like my organization. So I'm happy to, get to work.
Thank you. Thank you for that question and comment. I appreciate you.
I had a quick question. I know we're at time. I'm Jenna Timken. I'm the director of our student counseling here at UTD. And also feel really impacted and just gained a lot from today. So thank you for just giving us the space and the labor I know you put into it, and the work you put into it. I am wondering how you, your kind of advice or feedback around advocating up. So as we're doing work on this, like as a system, as a smaller system, like as a center, how we also then advocate these things up, especially when we work in an institution like a university, how we ensure that this is happening like at a larger system level.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. So, goodness. Collectively, like it takes a village for real. And I think what happens is you cannot do this work by yourself. So it's, like if you're the only one who's kind of saying like, we want to do this, and you're talking to a supervisor and the actions in your group are not consistent with what you're saying, then that's problematic. But you do have to work on like your immediate culture. so that that change is there, and you have people who now find their voices. And so collectively you can then say, this is what our team wants, this is how we operate, these are our norms, and we would love to see this practiced in the larger organization. Like, you just have to, and it's also that courage thing. Like, I keep telling you about courage. You know, you can be the only one who's courageous, but until other people come up and it's like, you know what, the 5 of us are going to do this together. You know, and I think there's also strategy. And this is the part that's interesting. People don't understand, like, it's not literal. You can't just be like, well, I'm just going to go and protest. No, like any organized movement has players who speak up. And I'm going to give you something. Like, I'm a tenured faculty member. And so when our people in our organization wanted to propose something to the administration in the college, the tenured faculty were the ones who put their names and their faces on stuff, because other people were at will. There were students. And so you have to get the people who are willing to be the accomplices at that level of power, so they can then influence from that level of power too. So that's the strategy I'm saying. Who has the most to lose, and how do you put that accomplice puzzle together so that you're implementing it in an effective way and protecting people who can't protect themselves? That was a lot.
But that makes so much sense, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned having courage, and then going and being that advocate and going towards, the actionable actions that you take as like an ally. And then you also mentioned retaliation. So I guess for me, it's more of what advice would you have in the case that kind of that situation goes south? Say someone does advocate, go to HR, has a team, but it just doesn't go well, and then you're kind of just left there in the dust.
Yeah. So, okay. You know what? Thank you for that question. And I don't know if you're gonna like my answer, but there are two ways that I'm going to approach this, and I'm gonna talk about it. So the first is, sorry, I have these calls coming in. The first is that document, like, a system is still a system, and so you still do have to track like what happens, because you don't assume that everyone is going to be forthcoming in that system. So if there's something that's not right, like, you're still like, you know what, something wasn't equitable there, so let me somehow write this down, or let me somehow like follow up and look at the policies and processes and question it. So that's one thing. Like, if you know that there's something, state the facts and remain professional. And you have that right, you do. That's just life. Everyone's not going to like it, of course, because there's that tension that comes in, but I think sometimes you have to be an activist. I don't know if people want me to say this part, but being an activist at some point, like, you have to know what your non-negotiables are. And that's the thing that I've learned over time as well. Like, sometimes there are people who can really see a system and it's like, this system is not the best system. It's not really equitable, but I have to pay my bills and I can tolerate this, and I'm just going to kind of deal with it. But there are other people who are like, you know what? My presence here requires that I speak up. And so that's where that activism thing comes in. And you have to figure out, am I going to, shoot my shot in this organization because I believe in this too? And so many people, I think, don't think about it to be like, you know what, you've crossed into an activist space because there's resistance here, but you know that there's a civil rights issue and you now have to speak up. And so you just have to kind of weigh, like, given your place in the system, is this where you want to put all your stuff? And for me, that is where I am. Like, me talking about this topic is one where I have worked in an organization or worked in higher ed for 15 years, and I continue to see the same things. And then I've seen too many people cry. Like, when I know that there are people who are too afraid to say something, that got to me to such a point where I said, you know what? I don't think I was put in this position to have a title and just get a paycheck, because that doesn't feel right to me as a person. Yes, it's easy for me to live that life, but that's not the life that I feel I was put on this earth to live. And that's why I am not the most popular person. We're getting into real talk right now. Everybody does not like me. And if you want to be liked and do this work, you need to do some other kind of work. That's the real talk for this. That was a lot.
No, I like appreciate the transparency and again the authenticity that you bring in this space. I guess I wanted to kind of flip it. So what, because we have students here as well,
Yeah.
what if it's in the case of a student organization or a student that has done the advocacy, has done the work, but maybe staff members aren't giving them as much as they hoped for? What would you give them or tell them so that maybe they can go about this space and get the help that they want?
Right. You know what? I'm an engineer. So when I talk about engineering, I talk about having your data right. You know, having your stats right, kind of being able to make your case. Um, you know, I'm gonna use an example just to prove this point, but like when you're talking about inequities, like pay inequities, you know, you work at a public institution, but there are some data that you have access to. So if that was an issue, you know, you can present like you know, a spreadsheet to say these are the data. I'm asking for this particular policy change because I've done this research and I see that there are these inequities in this way. And so this is why I'm proposing this. Like whenever you are working in a system, I've seen this from the administrative part and I've seen it like as a faculty, you know, people do respond, they don't respond as much to emotion in organizations as much as they do like this is connected back to policy or a gap in policy or some other issue. And so you want to find a way to frame your conversations in ways that are connected back to organizational culture, to data, and to things that people who don't have a lot of time will be able to engage with. Because otherwise, it just looks like you're just being a mess. Like, go somewhere. That makes no sense. That's how people think, you know, in higher ed. I have no time for the emotion and the silliness. What are you doing?
I agree.
Hi, Monica. I have a question, and this is in my role as a teaching faculty here at UTD. I teach chemistry. So whenever I'm teaching chemistry, and this is freshman chemistry, I struggle with this. Um, I'm teaching about all the, you know, the work that has been done, because that's the curriculum, work that has been done by old, men in Europe. And there is no examples in the curriculum from anywhere else.
Hmm.
And I just want to, ask, how do we change this?
Yeah. You know what? So thank you for that question. I am a part of an organization called Black in Engineering, and I know there's a Black in Chemistry right now. And so one of the and so they do a lot of stuff on Twitter. Like a lot of these organizations are out in the Twitterverse and social media. But I know that, you know, questions like that would possibly be of interest to groups that are focused on these topics. So connecting that way is one. And then another is like actually like finding the information and
Right.
you know, presenting it yourself, like making that deliberate choice. And the reason I paused is because I know it takes work. You know, you think about all the things that people have to do, and it's like, here's just one more thing I have to do because it does not exist. But that's also that activism part too, where like the how we're going to change systems is to actually do some of this work that changes the systems and make this work public. Like that's why I'm all about social media, because it's like if we're just holding it to ourselves, then other people aren't able to use it too. And so I do think that there are people doing things like this, but connect back to, like I said, if you have access to social media, some of the people who are involved in Black in Chemistry might be able to help you out. But I know they do like roll calls, you know, just different, they expose, you know, a lot of people to the diversity that is in chemistry. So yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I think we are wrapping up, but I do want to share a comment that was shared in the chat by a participant. They stated, I have to go, but I'm truly thankful for this. Goodbye. Like seriously, I was tearing up a little at one point. Thank you.
Oh, I love that.
But thank you. As I mentioned, information has been shared in the chat. This channel is still open as well for everyone. if you would like to further add into the conversation or would like to refer back to the video as well. But thank you all so much for being here today and adding conversation to the space.
Thank you. Bye.